2003. I want to start today with our land acknowledgement, and that is the Seattle Community Police Commission acknowledges that we are on the traditional land of the Coast Salish people, including the Muckleshoot, Suquamish, and Duwamish people, past, present. And with humility, we recognize how we benefit from living on their land and water. And the Seattle Community Police Commission honors and lifts up these tribes, and we hope that this acknowledgement will encourage authentic relationships with urban Native people in the Coast Salish tribes. With that, I would like to begin by taking attendance. Yes, I see Tasha Johnson, your hand is up, about to take attendance. Commissioner Johnson.
I'm really sorry, but there's another link that's out there, and I was in that other link, and there's other people in there, but I couldn't unmute myself to tell them that to try the other link. So I don't know if there's a way to get over there.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Johnson. The other link is from the calendar invite, and the link that this meeting is on is from the agenda. And we have CPC staff in the other link trying to direct traffic folks in that other link to this link. And we are working to correct that problem moving forward.
Okay, so thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
No worries. Sorry for the confusion. I'll go ahead and start by taking attendance at today's meeting. I'll start with Commissioner Lars Erickson.
Here.
Good morning. Reverend Patricia Hunter.
Present.
Commissioner Adrian Levitt has an excused absence. Commissioner Levitt is in trial. Commissioner Suzette Dickerson. No answer. Commissioner Lynn Wilson.
Present.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Commissioner Raven Tyler is not present. She has an excused absence this morning. Commissioner Mary Ruffin.
Present.
Good morning. Commissioner Reverend Harriet Walden.
Present.
Commissioner Joel Merkel, that is me. I am here. Good morning. Commissioner LaJaya Washington. No answer. Commissioner Mark Mullins.
Commissioner Mark Mullins is here, barely.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. Commissioner Tony Gadke.
I just promoted him to panelist.
I see Commissioner Gadke here. Commissioner Gadke, can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, okay, great.
I'm present as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Jeremy Wood. No answer. Commissioner Tasha Johnson, we already spoke with you. Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Good morning.
And Commissioner Erica Newman. Not present. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. First items on the agenda this morning are first to approve today's draft agenda as was circulated previously. And are there any objections to approving today's draft agenda?
I move to adopt the agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner Erickson. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. All in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The agenda is adopted. Thank you, everyone. Also, the minutes from the last meeting were circulated. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as was circulated from the last meeting?
I move that we accept the minutes as distributed.
Thank you, Commissioner Hunter. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a second. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes that were circulated, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? And minutes are adopted. Thank you, everyone. That moves us into the first item on our agenda, which is the co-chair updates. I have a couple updates that I'll provide, and then I'll defer to my co-chairs to see if they have any additional updates. The first is that last week, the Seattle City Council held a hearing for well, a number of things, but one of the things that the council considered was the nomination of Phil Sanchez to be our newest CPC commissioner. He would occupy a commissioner position that is appointed by the CPC. He'd be one of the CPC appointees. He identifies from not only the Mexican American, but also the Asian American community, and has a long history working in the criminal justice system, and working with marginalized communities. So we expect that full council will approve his confirmation next week, and so that he will be confirmed as a commissioner by the next time we meet, which would be on the October 18th. So that is our newest commissioner update. The other update I wanted to provide is I'm sure folks saw that the mayor presented his budget or unveiled his budget last week. One thing that is particularly notable to us, as folks recall, we worked pretty hard as a commission earlier this year on making recommendations to the city council on amending the authorizing ordinance, the Seattle Police Accountability Ordinance that made the CPC a permanent independent entity in the Seattle Police Accountability System. And one of the things that we asked for was, or advocated for and successfully achieved, was a deputy director position within the CPC staff. That is something that OPA and OIG have, but the CPC has never had it. And we believe that will be a significant step towards improving stability and strength of the CPC. And it's something that we thought was very important. But what we are very excited to report is that full funding for that position as a new FTE was included in the mayor's budget. We expect full support for that in the city council. So we're hopeful that by the end of the year, we will have all the funding we need and all the authority we need to hire a full-time deputy director at the staff level. So that is exciting news. The other bit I wanted to touch on is at the last meeting we voted to send a letter to SPD Chief Diaz regarding Detective Otterer. Specifically, we asked the chief to exercise his authority to put Detective Otterer on unpaid leave pending an OPA investigation. It's my understanding from, well, firstly, I have not received, or the co-chairs have not received a formal response from SPD, but we have seen that SPD has put Detective Otterer on like a non-patrol assignment, like a desk assignment, as I understand it. And it's further my understanding that SPD likely believes the current contract with SPOG prevents the chief from taking that action, or at least the SPD's interpretation of the SPOG contract prevents that action. So I wanted to provide that update. And I don't have any additional co-chair updates at this time, but I want to see if my co-chair said anything.
I don't have anything more.
Okay. I guess the one last thing I'll mention before moving on to the executive director updates is that the one other thing that was considered at last week's council hearing, Public Safety Human Services Committee hearing, was a resolution related to the SPMA contract negotiations and setting, essentially the city council's resolution prior to that table being set for those negotiations. The CPC wrote a letter to the city council, as did OPA and OIG, outlining our priorities for what we believe should be considered at the bargaining table for the next SPMA contract. And the city council adopted a resolution supporting those priorities. And that is, I think, one of the final steps before the bargaining table is set for the next SPMA contract. So that occurred at last week's hearing. Oh, yes. Co-chair Walden just reminded me that at last week's committee hearing, just another thing to note, towards the end of Mr. Sanchez's confirmation hearing, chair of the committee, Councilmember Lisa Herbold, made some pretty nice comments about the role that the CPC is playing and what we have in front of us going forward with respect to policy development and how community engagement is very complementary and helpful to that policy development goal. And she had some very nice comments about how those things can work together and how the CPC is doing that work right now. So if folks want to go look at that, the committee hearing is video recorded and can be accessed. So that's all I have. So at this point, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Kali Ellis for the executive director updates.
Well, thank you. Yes, we are very excited that we are going to hopefully be able to start through the process of hiring a deputy director. That would be next year after we go through everything in the budget process. But we are in the final stages, you might have heard me talking about it, of hiring our senior policy analyst. We have final interviews later this week, myself and Reverend Hunter. We're really looking forward to that because there were some very strong candidates in that pool. And then next up in terms of hiring, we're going to be hiring for our communications advisor position. So watch for that as we start to build up into what will be eventually 10 FTE on the CPC staff side. That's it for me.
Okay, thank you. And next up, we have Felicia Cross, Director of Community Engagement, to provide an update on community engagement.
Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and take the lead.
Oh, Joe Nathan, sorry. We have Joe Nathan here in the room on staff. Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't pass you over. So go ahead and provide the update.
Yeah, just a little bit here. We're just rounding back up to the annual report meeting. Folks are taking some vacation, going on to some conferences. Speaking of conferences, I think Colin might be mentioning some of this later, but I hope I'm not stealing some thunder. Felicia went to Virginia. She also did a powerful job. She went with the NPCAA, National Police Academy Association. There was a conference out there in Virginia. She did a presentation. Apparently she did so well that the board of directors had to give her a nice little shout out. So they really honored her. So kudos to Felicia and representing CPC there. B2's out today. I'll just kind of go to some of the things that I've been working to do in addition to the team. Got a chance to meet with Shanice Seacrest, who is now attorney Shanice Seacrest, who is now the regional president for the NAACP, covering Alaska, Oregon, Washington. So we were able to have some great discussions just about youth violence prevention, also just ways to collaborate when it comes to this work on community policing, talking about data and policy development. So that was a great meeting. Marty Patu and Nicole Jones from United Way Boys and Girls Club, got a chance to connect with them. This is a powerful piece because, of course, remember there was that incident in Rainier Beach where the 5 workers got shot. Nicole was in the store at the time, and things happened, and she came back to see the events, which was crazy. But all to say, they had a follow-up gathering, food and, like I say, food, folks, and fun. But just to kind of say we're taking this space back over again. But in that great ceremony, they reached out to say, we've had our issues trusting police, et cetera, but we recognize the power and the need for community policing, and we want to reach out. So it's like, we trust you. They were talking with me and Ricky too, and they knew us, they trust us. So it was just cool. So I think our consistency, the relationships that we're building is having an effect. So they want to be with us. We'll be with them this week to just talk about how to work forward too. That saying too, I was in a conference in Philly, just talking about this community policing piece. This community policing piece. I was wearing some of my CPC gear and I was getting hazed a little bit. Police, this is a whole thing about you trusting you work with the police. I'm giving a better idea of what's going on. I wasn't going to share this story, but the police encouraged me to do it. But what was cool is that I was with some folks at this conference. We were getting something to eat later in that evening. An officer came up and saw us at this one spot. He's like, "No, that's not the spot to go. You should go to this other place down the street." And he encouraged us to do it. And we took his advice. But then as we're walking along the way, the cop comes up again. We're like, "What's going on?" He actually offered to give us a ride to the location that he had suggested. So four of us get in the back of the car, or get in the car, and he takes us there, and then he's showing us the spot, and he's telling us all this, the history about the area, and then he ushers us back to the place, and that really resonated with the group. It was just kind of that reminder of like, with these relationships, with these partnerships, it felt like it was a demonstration of what this community policing can do. You have the right trust and the right folks in the situation. So I don't know, that's just, that story just kind of moved me. I know Felicia thought I should share it, so I just wanted to share it with everyone else here.
That's a good question. Was it your merch that got him to know that you were with the,
I didn't have it on that night.
oh, you didn't have it on?
No,
Oh, okay,
no.
okay.
But it was also because they were hazing me so much, and I was trying to let them know how there's some power in this model, and then I felt like it was just a good demonstration of.
What was the name of that conference again?
It was the National Black MBA Association.
Oh, okay.
So working on executive leadership and things like that. So it was,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So I was with some powerful folks, which was some great connections. That's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
But it was just and there were some other stories with some of the cops in Philly that were great too. It was cool. Talking about connecting with the officers. It was almost a presentation that me and Collie had before the badge. Collie's been working to meet with them monthly, and she asked engagement to join her in that piece, and we're definitely excited to do that. We recognize the power of us coming together and just be able to share from the policy side and the engagement side, and just be able to talk into them and to tie them to them with our wisdom in the situation. And so we're looking forward to that collaboration with SPD and training up those young officers.
It's a good program. I'm part of that one too.
Yeah.
I do Wednesdays, yeah.
And then speaking of you two, you and Felicia were all at the, I know it's taking a little longer, but I just want to make sure because we spent some good stuff because we actually made the news recently for being in the African American advisory meeting with the young gal Janabi Hamdullah. She was we were honoring her death, and she has representatives there. Reverend Walden did a good job praying, getting everything set up that day. But we also had some key addresses to just talk about the situation. And Joel, you kind of hit on some of it too, just with some of the issues with the union and the leaders. Some powerful things got addressed, but yeah, it was cool. Enough that they showcased that on the news. And yeah, so in continuing forward, as we're getting caught up, but we're also planning forward. We're working on a retreat as an all staff. We're working to build our cohesion and working on some powerful plans for the future. Looking forward to that. And all that to say, there's more things coming up too as we're working on calendaring. There's a North PAC meeting tonight. Hopefully you all can be in attendance if you need. Actually, the links are on the calendar. I've been putting stuff on the calendar. Hopefully, commissioners, you can see that, be able to join in on that. So listen in tonight. That's tonight at 7. Also, we have partners with ACRS, the Asian Counseling Referral Service. So they have their 50th gala this Saturday. They have a gala event. It'd be great if we can show our face there too, because they are definitely a partner with us. And that's this Saturday, and that's from 6 to 9 p.m. So again, just a reminder to check your calendars. And yeah,
Could you
show our faces.
I don't get your calendar because I'll tell you why at another time.
Okay.
So I haven't seen it, so I will.
Thank you for sharing that, because if you are getting these events on your calendar, please let me know so we can work on it.
And just so folks know what Joe Nathan's talking about, that he's done a wonderful job adding really important community events to the Seattle.gov calendar for the CPC. So commissioners, please regularly check your city email, your Seattle.gov email, so that you can be plugged into those events and do what you can do to attend more of those. But thank you to our community engagement staff, particularly Joe Nathan, for organizing all of that.
And before we move on too quickly, I want to acknowledge, even though it may not technically fall under community engagement, that I believe our interim exec participated in the NAACP event last week. So want to acknowledge that. And again, to thank Felicia for her excellent work out there in the community across the country. So thank you, Felicia, and a big shout out and a thank you to all the community engagement team.
I just wanted to say something about Joe Nathan. We had a conversation at Atlantic Boat Ramp as I was on duty and patrolling the park. I happened to run into Joe there, And as I was getting ready to tell him, you can't park there, I recognized that it was him, and we had a conversation. And the conversation was wonderful. An opportunity to talk to someone on the commission, and just kind of giving him a little bit of a rundown on my position and the things that I do in my district and in that park. So I appreciate him for stopping and talking to me. It was actually really I don't know. It was a great experience. I appreciate that.
It was a great talk. Thanks, Mark. I look forward to more connections, man.
Yes.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you, Reverend Hunter, as well.
Thank you, Felicia. Are there any additional community engagement updates?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And that moves us into staff department updates. Are there any staff department updates at this time? Okay. Well, that brings us to the next item on the agenda. Today we have FPD CO Brian Maxey with us today. Thank you for being here. And as some folks have seen in the media, there's been some media reporting in the last week or two about a program that SPD employed called Trulio. I'll try and do a brief summary and introduction and then turn it over to Brian Maxey to do a presentation on it. But essentially, as the co-chairs understand it, Trulio is a company that does artificial intelligence work or services and had contracted with SPD to do review of body worn video. And their contract with SPD was to do certain types of analysis of the body worn video and provide feedback to SPD regarding that process. And it was my understanding that it was a pilot program, and then at some point in February of 2023, the contract with Trulio was canceled. Of course, this was within a couple weeks of Detective Otter's body worn video being created. And so there was a number of questions raised in the media about the timing of that and also the reasons for it. And so that's just the introduction to the issue. And before I turn it over to Brian Maxey, I see Commissioner Gadke has his hand up. Go ahead, Commissioner Gadke.
Co-Chair Merkel, thank you. I apologize real quick before CEO Maxey starts his presentation, but just want to let everybody know, and my fellow commissioners, and I let Dr. Ellis know this morning, but I have to jump off the meeting in about 10 minutes. I have a mandatory department meeting I have to attend. So I just wanted to make everyone aware of that. So if you see me drop off, so you all know why. So that's all, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, CEO Maxey, thank you for being here today, and we look forward to hearing from you.
My pleasure, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to come talk to staff and the commission to address some of the concerns that have surfaced around Trulio. I too have to be at that department meeting at 10 p.m., so I do have a hard stop. So I'm going to briefly just talk through the issue, try to explain the history, and then open it up for questions to I'm not 100% sure where to look as far as cameras, but am I sitting in the right place for everyone?
You're in the right space. The
Okay.
camera that's on you is above the screen.
All right. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to come talk about this, because in the media reports and in some of the political swirl around this, there's been misinformation, there's been speculation, there's been some revisionist history, and amidst all of that, there are some legitimate concerns that I understand why this is on people's radar and why this is important. So I'm going to give you just a brief timeline of our history and interaction with a company called Trulio, and try to explain a little bit about what this software does, and perhaps most importantly, how we at the department were exploring its potential. Let me just, at the outset, this is a software that was never used operationally in any capacity at the Seattle Police Department. We never used this. We were simply testing it. It was what we call model validation. And I'll explain that in a lot more detail as I move forward. But the history was that in March of 2021, a company called Green Key approached us as a development partner because they wanted to test their software against real body-worn cameras. And they wanted us as a development partner to help validate that their system and the algorithms it uses their special sauce at reading audio from body-worn camera, whether it worked or not. And so in March, we entered into an agreement with them that was called a partner solution testing agreement. This was no cost, and we explored it with them. In October of 2021, we had council presentations. We had moved in the budget for funding for what we were calling our Equity, Accountability, and Quality Program. This is a series of data analytics projects. The equity piece was designed to responsibly analyze any disparities in our activities and try to get to the root cause of what was driving it. And we've had several studies that have looked at disparities at the police department, and typically they use a methodology where they simply take an officer activity and they throw it over population. This methodology has been rejected systemically by any reasonable social scientist. So we were trying to get real with this because operationally we needed to know if we are contributing or causing disparity, if we are approaching our activities with bias, we need to know it and we need to address it and we need to be able to identify it. So that was the equity part. The accountability part is we were attempting to use AVL data, which is the GPS location system, in our cars to look at over and under policing concerns. Were we too heavily in some neighborhoods? We were not enough in other neighborhoods, and we were using this to look at our presence, our discretionary presence, as opposed to the call volume we were receiving in different neighborhoods to see whether we were getting it right. And the quality part of our EAQ program initially was going to be Trulio. And what our intent was with Trulio was to systemically look at body-worn camera sentiment and determine whether our employees were escalating situations, de-escalating situations, vis-a-vis the community they were engaging in. And it was really to look at this systemically for quality control. Are we doing it right? Is our approach good? And if not, then what training do we need to improve the customer service that we're providing out to the community? That was brought before council, and it was all of those budget requests were cut in November of 2021. There was zero funding put towards our equity, accountability, or our quality programs by City Council. That being said, this was important to us. So also in November of 2021, we did a purchase of Trulio through an Amazon private marketplace. This is one of the vendors and permitted acquisition options under the city. We did have a privacy review of the system by ITD, and this was not flagged as surveillance technology because the body-worn cameras were already gathering the public information. This simply was a way to analyze it and look at it. So in their determination, not ours, this was not surveillance technology. So it did not have to go through the full surveillance review. We really, even though we contracted in November, we really had this, access to it as of January of 2022. It took ITD another 7 months to connect our body-worn camera evidence.com cloud environment with Trulio. So in late July of 2022, we were able to have access to the system for actual testing. So let me just take a moment and explain how this system works. So Trulio ingests, it streams audio from body-worn cameras. So we have a evidence.com, which has petabytes of in-car video. We connected it to Trulio. We would then stream the audio only, no video, through their system, where it would read it and it would transcribe it into text. It cannot detect voice inflection. It cannot detect sarcasm. It cannot detect voice stress. It doesn't do that. It simply transcribes this. And what you end up with is a script very similar to a play, where it would identify to the best that it can, and this is called speaker diarization, who was speaking and who said what. And usually it would say officer one, transcribe what they say, and then community member transcribe what they say. And we ran between July and February of 2020, July of 2022 to February of 2023, hundreds of thousands of videos. We would do daily exports of the audio through the system, and then our employees in our performance analytics group would validate it. And this is what we were working on with Trulio. In other words, are they getting it right? So we were able to, we actually don't know, but we would estimate we were able to review a few hundred videos to see whether its coding of whether this was polite or rude or disrespectful. They have different codes. We would validate that manually. And this is an important point because in the press, this is called artificial intelligence. This is not artificial intelligence. This is what's called machine learning. And how does the machine learn? It learns because people teach it. In other words, you have an audio stream, the software would code it, and then a person would go check the code and see, did it get it right? And it's through that process that you educate the model to become more sensitive to what certain word combinations are, whether they're rude or disrespectful or antagonistic. And that's what we were trying to validate. And we were particularly interested in this speaker diarization. Can it tell when it's an officer speaking and a community member speaking? Because if all we're doing is gathering words, if we don't know who said it, it's really not helpful, especially when we're trying to look at this again systemically. In other words, is the Seattle Police Department de-escalating situations? Are we being respectful? Are we being polite? That was the use case that we were exploring. We also thought it would be very, very useful for things like force review. When you have an identified incident that is under investigation by either force review or even potentially OPA, it could be that there's 5 or 10 officers wearing body cameras that were on scene. That can lead to a single incident requiring 50, 60 hours of video review. Our old policy required sergeants to watch it all. It became very clear that was not humanly possible to do. So then our new policy says they have to watch the relevant video. Well, how do you determine what's relevant unless you watch it? And our concern is that we would be missing things, and could Trulio do a fast transcription, coding, and say to sergeants or supervisors reviewing force, look here, this is where you should focus your efforts and review the video. So almost just like an index to what was relevant in a video. So that was another use case that we were exploring. In the beginning of 2023, we renewed the contract. That was on January 4th. Our sole source justification was approved by me in mid-January and then by FAS in late January. On January 30th, there was an article online by Axios, and that was followed very quickly by another article on February 3rd by GeekWire. Both of these indicated that the Seattle Police Department was an anchor client for Trulio and that we had been using the software since 2021. Again, I started this discussion saying we never used this. We never used this to identify a problematic officer. We never use this for disciplinary purposes. We were simply testing it to see if it would work with us. And our original contract said we were looking for 85%, I don't know what the word is, correctness on the model, is that it needed to get it right at least 85%. That's what we were striving for. So it was an imperfect system, but we were trying to improve it. These two articles caused a groundswell of agitation and anger in our employees. They believed that they had been spied on for the last 2 years without any discussion of it by SPD management. This was not a good place for us to be. This was not SPOG leadership coming to us with a personal issue. This was SPOG and our members and their members, are all of our employees furious, feeling betrayed by the department, and we were back on our heels. And we had zero political support within the city. I mentioned revisionist history. There is no one in the city that vocally supported our use of Trulio back in the day. And we found ourselves in a very, very bad position with very, very angry employees. And I went out to roll calls and tried to talk to as many people as I could specifically about this, to try to say, no, we weren't spying on you. No, we never did use this in any capacity. No one was ever disciplined because of this. But absent any external support and the anger of our employees, we decided to terminate the contract, which we did. That happened on February 7th of 2023. You know, there was a lot of other chatter that occurred at that time. Divest SPD, you know, was very proud that they had caused us to stop using this technology. The ACLU came out and commended us for not using artificial intelligence. Neither of those were the precipitating event. It was the anger of our employees. It was the fact that, in my opinion, and in the chief's opinion, we'd made a pretty significant misstep in that there was now public media allegations that we were spying on our officers and had been doing so for 2 years, and we hadn't talked to them. We had no internal messaging around this. And from our perspective, you know, how did we get there? It's because we were still testing the system. We didn't know how we were going to use it. We didn't know its value. So when do you start that internal messaging? When do you go to the union and say, we're bringing this use case online, when you actually don't know what it is you're doing? All that does, in our experience, is feed the speculation of you're just out to get us, as opposed to coming to them and say, hey, you know what, we want to use this for systemic quality control, or we want to use this for force review. Let's get everybody on board with that. So, you know, it was a misstep. We didn't get out ahead of this with our employees, and the backlash was pretty overwhelming. You know, we all know that the fatal accident and the statements by Officer Otterer occurred on the 24th of January 24th of 2023. That is very, very close to the Axios article. I understand why there's a tendency to conflate those two things, but let me be very, very clear. We were not aware of the Officer Otterer statements in January of 2023. We did not find those statements until August 1st of 2023, when one of our public disclosure officers found that in a routine review requesting all videos associated with pedestrian fatality, and escalated up the chain of command where it was immediately referred to OPA. That public disclosure officer has since received a commendation for her identification of this and her bringing this to the attention of command staff. I would submit that as a sign of strong accountability systems within a department. Certainly, had there been any interest in a cover-up or trying to avoid having the Officer Otterer video go out, we could have deleted it at that time and no one would have been the wiser. We did not. We sent it to OPA as required, and we are working with them as we speak on that investigation, supporting them in any way we can. I think I'll stop talking and see if there are any very specific questions. But what I hope to leave you with is that this was never operational. We didn't know about the auditor video. I have no idea what was in SPOG leadership's mind back in January of 2023. But what I do know is that this was not limited to them. This was a groundswell of anger from across the department because we did not message this properly internally. And with that, I guess I'll answer any questions I can.
Thank you, Mr. Maxey. I want to take liberty as co-chair to ask a couple of questions, but I do want to leave space for other commissioners to ask questions. I just want to start with, I understand that that SPOG may have felt, members of SPOG may have felt betrayed by the department over this. And I understand that for department leadership, that puts you in a difficult spot. But I have to just say that the community right now feels betrayed by SPOG. And there have been a number of incidents this summer that have made the community feel that way. And for SPOG to have a sentiment as described by you, the feeling you're just out to get us, there's some in the community that feel that that's how SPOG feels about them. And the other comment I just want to make is the timing issue. I think is not, as far as I can tell, is not specific to department leadership making the decision. It's if you look at the detective auditor's video, what it seems like to some folks in the community is that after he makes those comments, he seems to have self-awareness that the body-worn video was on and then turns it off after he makes some pretty vile comments. And then within a week or two, SPOG leadership discovers this Trulio program through the media and then makes a complaint. So it's not that SPD leadership was trying to cover up the auditor video. It was that SPOG leadership is suspected of trying to cover up the video or having concern about it being discovered. But I appreciate you trying to clarify that you had no knowledge, or SPD leadership had no knowledge of the auditor video until August. I think that is understood. It's more about what are the actions that SPOG leadership took in the days and weeks that followed the detective auditor video. And that's why the community is feeling betrayed by SPOG. But I do want to get into I have a number of questions, but the first question I have is when SPOG approached SPD leadership regarding this program, was there a provision within the SPOG contract that they cited as a reason for why Trulio could not move forward? Was there a labor issue that was raised?
I know they were contemplating filing a grievance against the department. What the basis of that grievance would be was not it. I do not know.
I have plenty of questions, but I do want to leave space for other commissioners to ask questions to COO Maxey, who thank you for being here, by the way. Thank you for that presentation.
Absolutely.
Is there anyone else that has another question?
I have a question. I have a question. Are you contemplating another company, something with the same idea? Since you thought it might be useful, is there another company out there that the department might be looking at to look at the same type of technology?
I've not looked at this space recently to see what other vendors exist, nor have I looked at how Trulio has developed since the time we severed the contract with them. Right now, the city attorney's office and the company are in discussions about the termination and how that will proceed. And so far, we have not had any serious conversations about reacquiring the technology. I'm not going to say that's foreclosed, but right now we've not had any serious conversations about it.
There's a couple commissioners appearing remotely that have questions. I see Commissioner Johnson's hand is up, but I also saw Commissioner Dickerson, your hand was up. Do you have a question, Commissioner Dickerson?
Reverend Walden had asked the question that I was going to ask, so thank you.
Commissioner Johnson.
Good morning. Thank you for that presentation. It was very informative. And I have a couple of questions about the actual analysis of the data that has been collected. It sounds like there were two different parts of contractual between you and Trulio. And in the first part, they both sound like they may not have even gotten to quite pilot phase. but like a pre-pilot phase maybe. But there was some data that was collected in both of those phases. Just wondering if there was any analysis of that information, if there were any voice analysis that happened. Did you ever get to 85%? What happened with the info?
Yeah, we never got far enough into the model validation to determine whether or not this was going to work for us. So was there any analysis done? Yes, there was testing. There was testing of the Trulio's coding and diarization of our body-worn audio. But we only have a few employees that work in this space, and this was not their sole project. This was one of many. So for a 7-month period, they kind of poked at it and tested and pulled and did validation, where they would sit down and watch videos alongside of the transcription to see whether the coding was correct, or that this was polite or rude or whatever, however it was coding it. I think there was a second effort to see whether it could identify things like, whether this was a Terry stop, whether there was an arrest that occurred, whether there was a use of force. I know one particular thing that we were curious about is, could this identify the consistency of our use of juvenile Miranda warnings with juveniles? And, could we test? So we were playing with a whole host of things, but we didn't get far enough to know this really was going to work for us. However, it was promising. We were pretty enthusiastic about it, which is why in January we re-upped the contract. I mean, let's be clear, we SPD thought this had some real value to us. And to the prior question, if we or the city ever decides that this is a technology that we should pursue, we're going to be a lot more deliberative and cautious about the acquisition and rollout, and make sure that we bring more people along with us if that were to occur.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask. First, I'll ask, with respect to the prospect of this technology being contracted for again, at this, and this kind of ties into the first question asked with respect to the contract. Is there anything that you see in the contract right now that prohibits SPD from employing a technology like this to review body-worn video for the purposes that you've articulated?
So I'm always careful about publicly stating what the contract says in my read of it, because once I say it, it kind of becomes truth.
Well, let me ask you this.
But I in this case, I think I do not see any formal barrier in the contract to the use cases we were pursuing.
Okay, thank you. And then with respect to the city council budget process, you mentioned that this was Trulio, or the technology that was encapsulated within Trulio was part of the equity, accountability, and quality programming.
Yes.
And is that was the programming that the city council did not fund in 2021, is that correct?
That's correct.
To what extent was Trulio and what SPD was doing with Trulio included in briefings to the city council as part of that? I guess what I'm trying to drill down on is, how much did the city council say no to Trulio versus saying no to this general budget authority that Trulio fell under?
We had, I think, there were budget papers prepared by central staff that broke out what Trulio was and explained what it was. I don't believe that we were ever given the opportunity to verbally present that in a hearing to council, because it got cut so quickly that we never got to that. But there certainly was documentation. We had the budget papers, we wrote about it, and then central staff did briefings on it as well.
Okay. Was there any council member that objected specifically to the Trulio program?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. I don't want to monopolize. Are there any other commissioners that have questions?
Officer Mullins has a question.
Go ahead, Officer Mullins.
Sir, I want to give you respect for being involved in this Trulio program, and you've admitted or you stated that maybe the rollout was problematic in the way you did it. And I appreciate you saying that maybe there was a problem with that. But my question is, why wasn't Trulio rolled out like many other programs that we have to test before it actually goes before it becomes commonplace on the street, such as our Bola Wrap or 40 cal or even our taser. There are pilot programs in which we take a segment of officers who go out on the street and actually use that product before it gets going. What was there any plan to test this before you guys rolled it out? And why wasn't it more open to discussion by SPOG and officers before you started testing it?
Oh, well, thank you for the question. I actually think that Commissioner Johnson kind of nailed it in her question to me. This was a pre-pilot phase. We were still trying to figure out how we might want to use it. With the Bola Wrap, with body-worn cameras, with in-car video, with the 40 millimeter, we knew what the use case was. The question is the tool going to work for the use case? We were still trying to determine which use case we wanted to use this for. And I think I mentioned earlier, that became the chicken or the egg. At what point do you approach SPOG and get a work group of cross-sectional around the department to work on this thing when we didn't know what we wanted to do with it? And I think that was the misstep, right? That I think once we had recontracted in early 23 for this, we should have been a little more aggressive about getting people together to start to work on it collaboratively. And, if we ever move forward with this again, that's what we'll do. That being said, this was, this is a hard software to talk about because of exactly the perception that our employees were left with, that it spies on them. And that was never our use case. We were never looking, trolling body-worn camera to find misconduct in order to jam officers up. And I don't think we would ever support that use case. But it was for quality control. It was perhaps to guide training, look at where we need to support our employees with guidance on how we wanted them to engage publicly. That has a lot of value to it. We just hadn't gotten there yet.
And just one more question, if I may. So not having a true understanding of the software and this program and how it works, if officers were talking in the car to each other as partners, would this pick up their conversation and start to analyze that as well as when we talk to the public?
So when we piped the audio through, again, we did this systemically, which means it was every single body-worn video for a 7-month period. We did not select or choose which we were sending through. So if there was a conversation that occurred within a patrol car between two officers, it certainly would be included in the overall analysis. But again, the system as we were using it doesn't get granular. It doesn't look at that specific conversation. It just goes into the data. It's like, a drop in the ocean. How do you find that drop? And that, the other thing is there's a limitation on the system that we were, again, when we talk about speaker diarization, if you have two officers, each of whom are wearing a body camera talking to each other, you should have two sides of that conversation. The system, when we were looking at it, couldn't figure that out. And, I know there's been some speculation that, this software could, I was just reading these articles last night, that this could have helped in the Tyree Nichols situation where you had officers that were giving conflicting and overlapping commands and confusion. That's exactly where this software, as we were testing it, failed, is when you have too many inputs to it, it starts to not be able to discern who's saying what and attribute sentiment to different people. So hopefully that answered your question, Officer Mullins.
It did. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And Mr. Maxey, thank you for being so generous with your time. I know it's after 10 a.m. and I know you have a meeting, but thank you for being here and for briefing us on this. This is a very emergent issue and we appreciate hearing from you.
If there's any last question that you need answered, I'm late already, so.
Are there any other questions from commissioners? As a prosecutor, I should probably know when to sit down and rest. So I will do so right now. Thank you.
And certainly if there are any follow-up questions, we're happy to deal with that offline with staff. And I do appreciate the opportunity to present here and bring our perspective on this. So thank you. And thanks for helping out with BTV.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Maxey. And that brings us to the next part of our agenda. We have the privilege of having Commissioner Wilson with us to present on crisis intervention training. Thank you, Commissioner Wilson, for being here to do that.
Thank you. So 2 weeks ago today, I missed the last meeting, and I'm technically the co-chair of the behavioral health work group with Erica Newman. We kind of suspended our meetings because to wait until we have a little bit more support from the staff, which hopefully will happen soon. But before Mina left, she set up a schedule with the Criminal Justice Training Commission program for us to attend the crisis training, intensive training that's 40 hours that's at the Criminal Justice Training Center, which is in Burien. And we had the option of just going to one day or part of a day if we wanted to. And so I was not in a position to take on the whole 40 hours, but I did attend one day, which just looked like would really be very informative and helpful. And that was the third day. And the topics that were on the program were, there's a 3-hour presentation on mental health disorders and medications and substance use disorders and verbal tactics used when you encounter crisis situations. And then in the afternoon, and then there was a 1-hour program by someone from Peer Kent Services. So the peer services are people who are recovering addicts who work with officers to set up follow-up appointments with people in recovery that they have one-on-one sort of mentoring situation. And then there were 4 hours in the afternoon on use of force considerations. And to me, that just looked like it would be really helpful going forward, just to know the reality of what's going on here. I will see that I actually got online to see if there was a way to sign up. I know Officer Mullins mentioned doing a ride along, which I have done in the past, and it looks like it's suspended. Not really sure, but there's not really a way that you can do that. So for me, this was at least a way to get some more like sort of hands-on information about what is really going on out there. So, and I will say, I also went into this with like really low expectations. Maybe it's just being involved in this issue for so long and working on litigation and, not getting totally cynical, but I just didn't have really high expectations. So if you haven't been to the Criminal Justice Training Center, it's pretty amazing. It's absolutely huge campus. It's very beautiful. there were basic training courses happening for new officers. There was a graduation from a correction officers training. So there were a lot of people there. The actual crisis intervention training happens in a portable building, which is, they don't have enough room for it in the main building. So it's in a portable in the back, and it's right next to the firearm training center. So that was kind of interesting. And then there were two staff members from OIG. Mina was there, and another staff member, and then myself, and from Seattle. There were probably about 25 people in the room, and there were maybe a third of them, maybe a quarter to a third of them were co-responders. And so I sort of got into their lingo, which is like MHP, DCR, co-responders. And so I sat at a table with two very, very highly experienced mental health professionals who had been co-responding with various police departments for just years. One of them had done it for 25 years with King County. And so the first presentation was absolutely fantastic. She was the presenter, Stephanie, her name is Stephanie Butler. She's a mental health professional. And Mina and I both agreed we could have sat there and listened to her all day. She was just really, really excellent, really gave concrete examples of what happens when people are in not just crisis, but when they're in a mental health psychotic situation, which is pretty much a lot of what officers deal with when they go out on these calls. So you have people who have decompensated and they're it's very volatile. So that was just really interesting. So she went through all the different kinds of really serious mental health disorders, schizophrenia, bipolar. Another interesting thing she talked about was when people are in chronic long-term depression, untreated, that they oftentimes have psychotic breaks, which means they're just completely not in reality. She also had people put on headphones to experience what happens when someone who's having a psychotic break starts hearing auditory hallucinations and how almost impossible it is to follow instructions from an officer. And so that was like a really interesting conversation. The officers that were there, there were no officers from Seattle. Apparently the ones who have taken the class have already been through it. So most of them were from Tacoma, Federal Way, Algona, Kent. They were, and then the King County Jail. There were some officers from the King County Jail there too. So it was really interesting, the conversation about how do you interact with someone who literally is not able to comprehend what you're saying to them because of their situation that they're in a psychotic state. And that was just really interesting. And what really inspired me after so long, and I know Reverend Walton and I have been involved in crisis intervention, pushing for the program for a long time, but what really, really inspired me was how thoughtful the people in that room were about the difficulties in interacting with someone in that kind of a situation. And the co-responders that I sat with, the mental health professionals, have dealt with these situations a lot too. They also told me that they would not go to one of these calls if they didn't have an officer with them. One of them said she always wore a bulletproof vest. The co-responders are all professional, master's degree, mostly social workers, psychology degrees, very highly educated and trained. And it was just really, really interesting. It really was. It was absolutely fascinating. The second hour, the second part of the program was a woman who's a recovering heroin addict, and she gave her story, which was also just pretty amazing. And very, very honest about some of the criminal activities she had been involved in to keep her habit going, and how had she not eventually gone to prison and then eventually got into a recovery program that worked for her. She had tried many before that. She said there was no doubt she would have died on the street from fentanyl. She was great. And apparently there's a statewide program on this. So it's all over the state, and that it works one-to-one, and it's peer. So the counselors, the people that work with the addicts are people who have experienced addiction and are in recovery from the addiction. So that was just really, really helpful to hear about that. I didn't stay for the entire presentation on the use of force. It was 4 hours long, and I just sort of like at that point, didn't stay for the whole thing. But that was presented by Captain, I think he's King County Sheriff Tony Lockhart, who also has lawyer training, and he was really, really. That was also really interesting. Was kind of mind opening. At this point, there's no, his description of the statistics around involuntary treatment. And he talked a lot about the statute. And so this is something that police officers deal with if they're encountering somebody who's actually clearly not able to take care of themselves or having a psychotic break, and they need to be removed from the situation they're in. There are no beds, basically. There's 400 beds, the entire state of Washington. Most of those beds, if not all of the beds, are taken up by people who are in criminal proceedings, usually felonies, and they are not, they're there for competency. A court has ordered them to be held until they're competent to stand trial. There's very little treatment for that. There's also, he also mentioned that since the pandemic, there's something like quadruple the number. The judges are finding that these criminal defendants are so mentally unable to work with their attorneys that it's like just huge numbers are being referred. So there's essentially no beds for people who are in severe psychiatric distress, who are not committing crimes. So so that was like really an eye-opener. The police officers in this room, all of them have to have a lot of experience before they can take this class. Pretty much verified that they what happens is they have to get a DCR, they have to get a designated crisis responder to sign off on an order to take them to a hospital to have them detained for the 72 hours. The ERs also are completely overwhelmed. They cannot, they basically don't keep them. They just put them back on the street. And most of the officers in that room had that experience before. And so that was like pretty demoralizing. So after a while, it's like, what's the point? So they go to all this trouble, they have to write reports up and get these orders from a DCR to have this person taken to the hospital. And within 6 or 7 hours, a person is released back onto the street. And one of the other things that the first presenter, Stephanie, talked about was that either in a crisis situation or a psychotic break situation, it subsides. And so the other problem with going to all the paperwork and then getting the person to the ER is that by the time they get to the ER, they're kind of calm. They're calm at that point. They're okay. They're cool. So this is like a huge problem. It's just, but it was so interesting to hear it. The person who did the use of force consideration part of this program, the 4 hours, and I just, like I said, I listened to 2 hours of it, but he was really good at coming up with some really good ways of talking to people, getting some more information, relating to them, and finding other people in the environment who can maybe help the person calm down. They also, one of them talked about how, there's these agencies that supposedly provide mental health treatment, but a lot of times people have to take 4 buses to get there, or they're not accessible. The treatment is basically not accessible. So the mental health providers do everything they can, and they were just great. They really were. It was just really, really interesting to sit and talk to them. And I do know that afterwards, Tisha, the woman that was sort of shepherding us around, I was talking to the other person at OIG, and the OIG is basically sending everybody to this, the whole 40 hours, which I'm not sure if I would, it's kind of a lot to do 40 hours. It's down in Bury and it's a ways away, and it goes until 6:30 at night, so it's a long day. They do have lunch. I will say that the food was like not great. It wasn't great. And then, so I was going to actually, because it was so interesting, the day before, day 2, and they talked a lot about what happened on day 2. So day 2 is de-escalation training, active listening, de-escalation training, also by Stephanie, who just, she just was great. And then there's a presentation from the King County Therapeutic Court. And that would really be interesting to hear, especially in light of the fact that there apparently is not much in the way of places for people to get treatment that's accessible. And then there's a whole hour on working with dispatch and call takers. And I thought that would really be interesting in light of the fact that we now, I mean, now Seattle 911 is no longer part of the police department, but it would really be interesting to get some more information about that, especially because of the case that I just saw was settled a couple days ago, where there was this list, the dispatch list, where they the EMTs would not go into certain locations without law enforcement backup in Seattle, which is an issue. And the person that had called 911 had a heart attack and died. So because it was a mistake. So just to hear, it's just really, really informative. And what's really good about it is that you're with people that are actually doing this every day and that are dealing with the sort of catastrophic increases in these situations. And the increase is just kind of overwhelming. So I also noticed that, I mean, these officers were just like, they were just totally listening to everything too, and really, really participating. So just highly recommend anybody going to it. I was really surprised. And we will, I have the contact person to, if people are interested in contacting. I think the October is once a month and training 40 hours. So it's a whole week. It does take them a while to arrange for all the presenters because they have really high experienced trainers and they've all got scheduled. So I don't know when the November training is going to be, but it's pretty much once a month. So I'm sure they were very, very gracious and really happy that we were there. Really, the OIG people were totally listening and taking notes. I didn't take notes, but anyway, yeah, so I totally recommend it. That's all the information for those that I can pass on for those of you who won't be able to go down there. It is a long day, no doubt about it. So anyway, that's my 10 minutes.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Wilson, for that update and presentation and for attending all of that. Really appreciate it. I can, echo a lot of what you said about some of the challenges in the mental health care and crisis care system, but that is a much bigger issue for another day. But I also see Community Engagement Director Cross has her hand up. I want to acknowledge her.
Thank you, Joel. So without getting into my experience with the whole mental health thing, but very good presentation Commissioner. Very good presentation, very thorough, realistic. But I also see Alex, and she's probably in the group. Alex, she works with the training center, and I hate to put you on blast, Alex, but could maybe give some updates about when the next training is, if she's still on. You see Alex?
I don't see an Alex.
I don't think she's on anymore.
I think she left.
Oh.
Well, we are running a little short on time, but I want to just give space for any commissioners to ask questions if there are any. And if not, of course, you can also reach out to Commissioner Wilson after the meeting.
I just like to thank Lynn for going on. Mothers was responsible for for implementing the CIT and working with the Seattle Police Department back in 97, 98, and 99. So thank you for going for that. I do plan to go myself for the new training. Yeah. Thanks.
So my understanding from Tisha Tyler, who is the person who's in charge of bringing people from outside to these trainings, she said that this week, this is the October session, this week right now that we're in. And so they don't have the November one scheduled yet. And she's going to notify me so I can send out an email for the dates for the November session when I get it. So it just all depends on, these people are all busy professionals, and so it depends on their schedule so that she can coordinate, make sure that people are available to participate as trainers. So the trainers are all doing they're all doing full-time jobs. So they're not just trainers. They're actually out there doing this in the street all the time. So it's but I can send that around as soon as I find out.
Thank you again. Well, unless there's any additional comments or questions, which they are welcomed if there are, we can move into the final agenda item, which is department updates. I'll go ahead and start with City Council update. Newell Aldrich, Councilmember Herbold's representative, is not present today, but provided us the following update. He indicates that the council is holding budget meetings, as you can imagine, with the mayor's budget being released last week, as part of their consideration of the mayor's 2024 proposed budget. And the budget committee is scheduled to meet next Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and hold a public hearing on the evening of October 18th. And the schedule information for the council's agenda is on the council website. So that's the update from council. I'll go ahead and see if anyone from the mayor's office is present to provide an update. Hearing nothing, I will move on to the monitoring team. Is anyone from the monitoring team present that has an update?
There's no report from the monitor team.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. I see Mr. Waldrop is here from DOJ. Do you have an update?
Hey, good morning, everyone. This is Matt. No update from the department this morning.
Okay, thank you. I understand OPA is not available today. Do not know if we have an update from OPA, but they're not available today. Go ahead and check in to see if anyone from Office of Inspector General is here for an update.
Good morning. I don't have much of an update, just to say that we've been working on surveillance audits and getting those wrapped up for the year. Tomorrow we have a traffic stops roundtable that a couple people from CPC will be attending. So we're looking forward to that. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And I know Mr. Maxey was here earlier for the Trulio presentation, but I'll just check in to see if anyone from SPD is present for an update from SPD. Hearing none, that brings us to the end of the agenda. Thank you everyone for being here and for participating. Our next meeting will be on October 18th. In the meantime, be safe everyone, and we hope to see you out in the community. Have a good day.